Hi, Christine. It sounds like you have a problem horse that probably needs an experienced person working with that horse. If you're getting on and riding around, what you're doing from what you describe like that is you're kind of sneaking rides on him to where you're not asking for anything, you're climbing up on his back, and you don't want to get him over a walk. You haven't got there yet. It sounds like a wreck looking for a place to happen. So I'm going to give you some things you can do, but you're going to have to kind of look in the mirror and really ask yourself if you're capable of handling this in a professional manner, because what you've got is you've got a horse that's 8 years old and he's set firmer in his ways, and that doesn't mean by any means that he can't be, turn into a real nice saddle horse in the right hands. Okay, so first thing I would do is I would suggest that you would get yourself some good help, and good help can kind of be hard to find because somebody might say, well, I can get on him and ride him or whatever like that and buck him out and be fine and dandy, and what you would have is a horse that person could ride and maybe not one that you could ride. So to start with, you being real green, you need to get groundwork done on this horse to where he understands that you are his leader. Now, when you do the kind of groundwork I'm talking about, directing and driving and using suggest, ask, tell methods about bringing that energy up and down, your horse understands that you are his leader in the herd of two that you've developed. And how to get the horse to understand that you as his leader is by getting control of his feet. You can direct him in a direction that he's going, also the speed that he's traveling. You can bring that energy up and you can shut it down on the end of a halter rope to where you probably after a little while can get most of what I'm talking about done with an open hand on the end of your halter. But it takes practice and it takes some skill, and there's plenty of videos that you can see to where they can teach you how to do this. Now, I don't mean lunging. What a lot of people will do is if they have a horse that's a problem horse, they'll put him in a round pen and they'll chase him around a round pen enough, and all that does is it legs up a problem horse, because once that horse makes a revolution or two around that round pen, he can block you out and be not thinking about what you're asking of him. So, and what he's doing too is horses are flight animals, and as you're chasing him around, he's just fleeing the problem. But you have him contained so he's not getting away from you. But with the proper halter work and groundwork that I'm talking about like that, he keeps having to engage with you mentally. And he understands by the placement where your body is that you're getting control of his feet, and and what I mean by that, it's the same thing that in a herd environment, if you were to take some horses and put them in together in a pen or whatever to where they had to intermingle with each other and they didn't know each other, it would be figured out pretty quick who would be the leader of that herd. And the leader of that herd would be the horse that could move the other horses around. He'd be at the top level. And then it would fall into, there would be one that would be in second position, one in third and fourth. And even the one that's lowly on the bottom doesn't feel like, oh, woe is me, because he understands, okay, this is where I fit in this herd dynamic. And he knows where he needs to be safe. So when they're feeding him, he knows he's the last one that comes in, and he's comfortable. Because horses are in search of a leader, but they're not going to give that privilege out just because you walk in on 2 feet. So with proper groundwork, you're going to get to that horse's mind to where he looks at you as a leader. And being as green as it sounds you are on that, I would do tons of that groundwork. And then when you were to get horseback on him, all you're doing is, before I would even get horseback on him, you said he's worried about things above him. Now, horses in a natural environment are generally worried about things above them because their enemies, a lot of times, say cougars or whatever, they are above them. So they're leery of things in trees and things that might get them and jump out of a tree and get them. That's just their natural instinct. So this horse is leery about things above you. What you need to do in the course of your groundwork is get him to where he'll come up to you on a fence, to where you can get your hand up high above him. You might get to where you're on a mounting block or something pretty high that you can get him to where when you do your groundwork and you break them left and right across you, you can get your hands up high. And once you get him to where You've got him handling pretty good on the end of the halter to where if something scares him, that you can tip his nose towards you and his hindquarters are going to yield away from you, and you can shut that energy down. Once you get him to that point, what I would do is I'd introduce a flag. I wouldn't introduce a flag before that, because what's probably going to happen is when you bring, it sounds like he is high on his self-preservation, that he wants to leave you. If you were to introduce that flag before maybe you had good control of his feet on the end of the halter shank, he's probably going to get you in a situation to where he's going to break away from you, tear the halter out of your hand and run off. And hopefully not, but you know, he might blow by you and kick you doing it. So you're going to get him handy on the end of that halter rope, and you're going to get him to where, and in course one at Cowboy Campus, we talk a bunch about getting those horses and working them from, say, another horse and also from up off a fence to where you can get above them with what might scare them. And then I'd introduce them to a flag. Now, a flag can be a reassuring object, a comforting object, and it can also be a scary object. And proper flag work isn't just totally desensitizing the horse to the flag, it's also sensitizing him to the flag. It's a real balance, because a flag, the horse should look to you to where if you're relaxed when you're using the flag and you're not giving him any indication where to go, and you say maybe waving that flag around, well then that's just sort of static noise. It shouldn't be anything that would bother him, because he's looking to you and you're relaxed. You want to be his leader. So when things trouble him, he looks to you for reassurance. So that's going back to the old herd deal, to where you might have a bunch of horses out grazing, and there might be something that maybe makes a sound or something, and they all look up and they say, "What's that?" And they'll look to their leader, and the leader will look out to see what it is and figure it out. And if it's a threat to the herd, the leader will take the horses and move them off. But say something spooked the horses, and the leader looks up and he looks over there and he says, "Oh, well, it was just a squirrel." Well, the other horses are going to look to the leader, and if that horse puts his head down and goes to grazing again, the rest of them are going to say, "Okay, everything is fine." But if that horse looked up and said, "There's something scary and we have to move," they're going to go with him. So that's what you need to be able to set yourself up with in that scenario, to where your horse looks at you for reassurance. And the proper flag work will teach that horse to where you could be raising a ruckus with that flag, but as long as your body's in neutral, to where he looks to you and the horse will get relaxed. And then maybe the slightest little indication with your flag can get them moved off. But what you're starting to do is that horse is starting to see you in a whole different scenario, to where you're his leader. You're not part of the problem, you're the solution. Okay? You hear stories all the time about somebody will be riding down the trail and they'll say, "Out of nowhere my horse spooked and bucked me off." Well, what has happened is that horse got bothered, and it probably didn't happen out of nowhere. He was probably telling you about it, but you missed it. But maybe it did. Maybe everything was fine and you were walking down the trail and something spooked your horse, and the first thing he did is jump and buck you off, because what he considers is when all heck breaks loose, you're part of the problem. First thing I got to do is self-preservation. I got to get rid of you, and then I got to get out of here. What you want your horse to look at you is, when something like that happens, he looks back to you, and because you're sitting relaxed in the saddle and everything is fine, he's going to say, "It's all right. My leader is saying that we don't need to leave." So this dynamic, it takes some work and it takes some skill. So that's why I'm saying, if you're real green, you probably should get some help on this, and be darn particular who you get to help you, okay? You might ask around, because there's people that are pretty savvy to this, and there's people that aren't very savvy to this, that have their shingles out. But if you hang in there, you're going to have some success on this, because just because the horse is 8 years old doesn't mean he can't turn into a nice saddle horse. But I've just kind of touched the surface on this issue, but the main thing I would get before I would be thinking about sneaking a ride on him, because that's what it sounds like you're doing. You're climbing up there and that horse is just walking around. Now, if something spooked that horse and you're on his back, now maybe you can walk around and sneak that ride on him. But if something spooked that horse and all of a sudden he thought he had to get out of there to save his life, and he sounds like he's pretty fractious, first thing he's probably going to do is get rid of you, because he perceives you as part of the problem, not part of the answer. So get real solid on that groundwork, and I'd get some help if you're as green as you sound that you are.